14:08 local time, 26 miles south of Kharg Island, a U.S. Navy Seahawk is racing north at 50 feet to stop a tanker, the first enforcement in the renewed U.S. naval blockade. Routine on paper. Hail her, warn her, stop her. What nobody in that cockpit knows is that on Kharg, a Quad-15 missile battery has survived 90 American airstrikes by staying quiet. And today, it finally has a reason to talk. But something else finds the helo first. Tracer fire walks across the water where the aircraft sat 2 seconds ago. The Seahawk brakes hard right, airframe shuddering through the turn, down to 30 feet altitude. It's coming from above them, pouring off the upper deck of a wellhead platform that hasn't pumped anything since the 80s. Rust down every leg, a windsock rotted to threads. ZU-23-2, twin 23mm barrels, an iron ring sight, and a man in sandals on a crank handle. It radiates nothing, so the threat receivers hear nothing. The warning suite is built to catch shouting, and this thing doesn't shout. 12 days that gunner sat on that deck with a thermos, waiting for something worth the ammunition, and the geometry is upside down. That gun deck stands 100 feet over the water on 4 rusted legs, so the gunner isn't craning up at a fast-crossing target the way every anti-aircraft gun since 1915 has had to. He's looking down a shallow slope at a helicopter silhouetted against flat, bright water. No cover, nowhere to put it. He leads the Seahawk the way he was taught, a full aircraft length out front, and walks the burst into the gap where it should have been. The trench that hides you from the sniper isn't worth much once the sniper climbs onto the roof. So climb. Except that's the door this crew doesn't have, and the reason is ticking in their headsets every few sweeps. An Iranian search radar out of Bashir brushing the sky over their heads. Up the coast, an S-300 PMU-2 owns everything above about 100 feet, with interceptors that leave the tube at Mach 6. From launch warning, a helicopter gets about 45 seconds, and 45 seconds of maximum climb buys a Seahawk maybe 1,200 feet. It's a foot race against a bullet, and the bullet is having a wonderful afternoon. What the missile can't do is bend. The beam guiding it flies straight while the planet curls away underneath. So a machine that stays down in the wave clutter is standing behind a hill made of ocean. 50 feet is the only altitude on offer. On any other day, a Growler would already be overhead introducing that battery to an anti-radiation missile. Today, every jammer in the theater is 400 miles southeast helping turn Greater Tomb into a Buc-ee's parking lot. So the Navy's entire answer to Iranian air defense this afternoon is one helicopter flying like it stole something. The pilot runs out sideways instead of up, 30 feet, accelerating, and the tracer fire falls behind and quits. That solves the gun. It does nothing about the man standing behind the gunner with a tube on his shoulder. A launch plume off the upper deck. Flares immediately punch out of the dispenser in a spreading string, burning white against the afternoon. The missile ignores every one of them. The flares should work. They don't. That was a Massaug 2 doing the ignoring, and the reason is the Seeker's second eye. It reads heat in 2 separate bands at once, throwing away anything that burns bright in one and dim in the other, which is precisely what a magnesium flare does. Think of a bouncer checking ID under 2 different lights. The fake glows wrong under the second one every time. The Seahawk's exhaust suppressors are doing what they can, folding cold rotor downwash into the engine exhaust before it ever leaves the airframe. And most mornings, that's the difference. But most of a signature isn't all of one, and this Seeker doesn't need all of it, it just needs enough. The missile goes wide off the tail, near enough that the door gunner watches it go, and burns out over the swells. Nobody in the aircraft ever sees the man who fired it. They never do. What just missed them costs about $20,000, and one man carries it up a ladder. The entire engagement cost Iran 1 reload and a scorch mark on a helideck. Iran's air defense budget hard at work defending empty water. Here's what the crew doesn't know yet. 6 miles back, on a structure they passed 4 minutes ago, 2 men are still standing on a walkway. Binoculars. A handheld radio charged off a solar panel zip-tied to the railing. Not 1 watt generates off that platform, which leaves it invisible to every American receiver in the Gulf, and not worth a warhead besides. They read the bureau number off the tail boom as it went by and put it on the net. That call is the second half of a system whose first half sits along the shoreline 60 miles inland, strung out like a fence line. Long horizontal antenna arrays. That's Ghadir, working at the very bottom of the VHF band on radio waves around 33 feet long. Waves that size reflect hardest off objects roughly their own size, and a Seahawk is 54 feet of rotor disc. It rings like a church bell. What Ghadir can't do is aim. Its picture smears into an uncertainty box 17 miles across. It's held this aircraft on its plot since liftoff. 11 minutes gone. Fuel budgeted for the target spent on a rust pile. And the tanker is still 8.5 miles from water where nobody can legally touch her. The clock this crew actually cares about isn't on the instrument panel. It's painted on the sea, the distance between Belma's bow and the 12-mile line. The Seahawk crabs left and pulls a beam, and the tanker grows until she fills the windscreen. A wall of red and black plate, riding high out of the water and barely moving. The wake behind her lies flat, no white water at all, just 5.5 knots against her own recorded average of 10. Her engine's fine. What she's doing is timing her arrival, and 12 decks up, her master isn't panicking. He's scheduling. Shadow Fleet voyages work because warships hail you, log you, and let you go. The paperwork is the punishment, and the cargo still sails. He's made this run 4 times since spring. What he's slower to register is that the voice on Channel 16 stopped repeating itself 9 minutes ago. The transponder says she's bound for Khor al-Zubair, a commercial port up in Iraq. Every merchant ship broadcasts an automatic identification signal, and the destination field inside it gets typed by hand, by whoever feels like typing it. Her actual course says Kharg Island and the loading jetties on its eastern shore. But one number on this ship can't be typed, changed, or repainted. An International Maritime Organization number gets stamped into a hull for life and doesn't change when the paint does. And 9289491 ties this ship through 4 previous names and 6 different flags. Aquarius Voyager, Maran Aquarius, Leonore, Bendigo, and now Belma. A burner phone the size of an office tower, and the SIM changes every voyage. All of it is paper. Paper works right up until a Navy crew chief looks through a pane of glass and reads the hull for himself. Running an American blockade in the world's biggest ship is like shoplifting from Costco in a parade float. Sooner or later, somebody at the door checks the receipt. On Channel 16, then 13, then 6, the co-pilot gets static for all 3. The bridge wings stay empty. Nobody even curious. Stopping a ship at sea runs on Marine VHF, the short-range CB band for ships, in 4 steps. Hail him. Repeated on alternate channels so the log proves he heard, then put rounds in the water where he can't miss them. Only after all of that fails does anybody aim at the ship itself. It's the same escalation a state trooper walks. Lights, siren, spike strips. Except this trooper is a helicopter, and the vehicle being pulled over weighs 250,000 tons. At 14:29, the crew chief leans into the door gun and walks a 2-second burst across the water 500 yards off her bow. A row of white geysers stands up in the sun where every man on that bridge has to see them. What he's firing? The Gal-21A, a 50 caliber machine gun on a swing mount, 1,100 rounds a minute, effective past 1,200 yards. Each round leaves the muzzle at 900 meters a second and weighs about what a hammerhead weighs, which is roughly what it does to sheet steel. Her course doesn't bend 1 degree. Step 4 is a missile, and the crew is still working out where to put it when the water off Kharg starts throwing wakes, 4 of them opening out of the haze, spreading wider as they come. Peykaap-IIIs, the boat Iran builds by the dozen because it plans on losing them by the dozen. 50-odd feet of hull doing better than 45 knots, a light anti-ship missile on the rail, and a rocket pod mounted forward. 8 days ago, the Americans put more than 60 of them on the bottom in a single morning, along with every coastal radar that made them useful. The coxswain running the lead hull was somewhere else that morning. He knows the odds, and he's coming anyway. Rooster tail 40 feet high, on a bearing that keeps the tanker between his hull and the helicopter. He understands the mask as well as the Americans do. 1 boat is a nuisance. 4 of them fanning out is a math problem, and Iran wrote it. A door gun points 1 direction at a time, and every second spent solving 1 boat hands the other 3 a free run on a bearing nobody's watching. From 6 miles out at that speed, they own this water in 8 minutes. The gun can reach them, but getting a firing line means turning the aircraft into the open, and the open is the problem. Because right now, the only cover on this ocean is the ship they came to stop. Belma stands 160 feet from waterline to signal mast. Draw a line from a radar antenna on Kharg across the top of her superstructure, and everything below that line on the bar side sits in a shadow the beam can't reach into. A hole in the picture the size of a helicopter, moving at 5.5 knots. A supertanker beam-on also throws an echo 1,000 times stronger than a helicopter's, so even a partial mast drowns the Seahawk inside the ship's own blaze of energy. The Shadow walks north as she makes way, and the helicopter flies a matching track to stay inside it. The tanker they're hunting now dictates where the Americans are allowed to be. Fine, right up until somebody needs a firing line. On Kharg, a Cordad-15 battery that has survived 90 American airstrikes by never keying its radar for longer than a few seconds gets a box on a bearing and starts earning the rest of it. They relocate between revetments every few hours and radiate in bursts too short to be useful, and they haven't gotten sloppy yet. The truck rolls out, stabilizers slam down, 4 canisters swing up to firing angle. That flat panel riding on the back of the truck is the best radar Iran builds, the Bashir. 90 miles of detection against a fighter, precision track at 75, 6 interceptors in the air at once, no dish, nothing spinning, a few thousand tiny transmitters steering the beam electronically, the way a stadium jumbotron moves a picture without a single bulb going anywhere. And against a helicopter at 50 feet, not one of those numbers means a thing. The same hill made of ocean that's kept this crew alive all afternoon draws a circle around the truck too. From 20 feet of antenna height against a target at 50, clean track doesn't start until 14 miles. The battery commander knows his circle to the meter. What he needs isn't a better radar. He needs the American to climb, just once, just for a few seconds. And the Belma is working on that for him, dragging the fight north, shrinking the safe water under the Seahawk with every mile she makes. 7 miles from the territorial line, the crew chief needs a firing line on the lead Peykaap. The pilot gives it to him. No swinging. The aircraft rising above the Belma's deck line to clear the superstructure. Before the horizon finishes settling, the man behind the GAU-21 lays into the trigger and 50 rounds go into the lead boat's engine covers. Her transom opens up. She slews hard left, trailing smoke out of the fight. 3 seconds of silhouette is all the battery commander needed. He's been waiting 8 days for an American to make exactly this mistake, and he doesn't waste it. Fire control energy, a lock, a commit, and the canister lid blows off the back of the truck. Sayad-III, 2,000 pounds of solid fuel interceptor doing around Mach 5, a mile every second. The warhead never has to touch the helicopter. 350 pounds of fragmentation only needs to burst close, and the air does the rest. 70 miles of reach, about New York to New Haven, north of $1 million around, and Iran doesn't have many left. 20 seconds out. The pilot puts the nose down and runs for the hull. 15 seconds. The Belma stern filling the windscreen, close enough to count the weld seams. 10, 5. The Sayad screams past the tanker and detonates 700 feet over open water, half a mile off the starboard beam. A white flash goes off the door glass. No shock at all. $1 million spent clearing seabirds off the Persian Gulf. That miss was physics, not luck. A missile moving that fast, aimed at where the target is, arrives at empty air. So the Bashir tracks the helicopter, computes an intercept point out ahead of it, and uplinks steering corrections every half second the whole way in. The instant the Seahawk dropped behind that hull, the radar had nothing left to update with. The intercept point froze and the missile flew, precisely, obediently, toward a prediction that had stopped moving. At that closing speed, every second of stale track walks the miss out by hundreds of yards. The crew on Kharg did everything the geometry allowed. The arithmetic belonged to the Americans. It usually does. And the bearing that nearly hit them never came off a radar screen. Work the launch backward. The Bashir couldn't see a helicopter at 50 feet. It hadn't all afternoon. Ghadir held the Seahawk inside a box 17 miles wide and could do no better. What shrank that box down to a firing bearing was a man on a rusted walkway 6 miles back, a pair of binoculars, and a radio charged off a $30 solar panel. Billions of dollars of Iranian sensors bought a neighborhood. A thermos and a good pair of eyes bought the address. On the truck, a second canister is already slewing into line. The trick works once, and everybody in the aircraft knows it. To the south, a destroyer captain gets a request he'd rather not hear. The answer takes its time coming back. Then it arrives as a change in the air itself. 60 miles south, the destroyer's spy radar snaps up to full radiate and an interceptor spins up in its cell. 4 octagonal faces built into the superstructure, 4 megawatts of peak power, better than 100 tracks at once. and every watt of it was already committed to a different war, because the IRGC has spent today putting ballistic missiles into American bases across the Gulf. A radar at full radiate stops being a sensor and becomes an address, and Iran's coastal cruise missile cells need a bearing in about 4 minutes. Somebody has to hold the flashlight in a dark room full of armored men. Fortunately, this flashlight has 96 missile tubes on the lawn. 6 minutes. That's the entire loan. 1 shot, 3 boats still closing, and the fastest way to waste all of it is to fire before the smoke is going the right direction. The mission's commander's eyes go to the band of unpainted red plate running the length of her hull at the waterline. The argument about where to put a missile ends there. Loaded, a ship of the Belma's class sits about 70 feet deep. Today, her cargo tanks hold nothing, so she draws about 36, near enough 40 feet of red plate standing clear of the sea. And those empty tanks are pumped full of inert gas. Cooled engine exhaust scrub below 5% oxygen. No crude to spill, and nothing down there with enough oxygen to catch. A warhead into a cargo tank punches a hole and accomplishes nothing else. And this is where June rewrote the targeting sheet. The obvious aim point, the engine room, is manned around the clock under international rules. An engineer, an oiler, and an electrician on watch, every hour at sea. Back in June, the Navy put Step 4 into a compartment like that, and the aim point moved for good. Off the machinery space, onto a 10-foot steel box 130 feet above the water. The one structure on her that stays empty, and the hardest thing on her to hit. 5 miles from the line, the Seahawk slides out a beam of the tanker, offset upwind, and stays out. This is the part nobody can shortcut. There isn't a clever version of what happens next. A sensor turret under the nose swings onto the funnel and locks. From 3 miles, the missile needs about 11 seconds of flight, and the aircraft has to hang in the open, steady, holding that mark for every one of them. You can't fire and dive. The Navy's entire plan for the next 11 seconds is to sit still and be brave. Behind them, the Bashir flares back on. 11 seconds to settle a track. 2 Peykaps inside 2 miles. 90 seconds left on the destroyer's clock. Every clock in this fight now runs on the same 11 seconds, and 2 aviators hold the turret steady through all of it. The first Hellfire tears off the rail. Look at the ball glass on that turret, frozen solid while the mount eats every jitter of the airframe. What comes out of it is near-infrared light at 1.064 microns, past the cutoff of the human eye, pulsing 10 to 20 times a second in a coded rhythm. The seeker riding that beam isn't hunting a ship, or a funnel, or heat, or metal. It chases a sparky barcode painted on steel, and anything that doesn't blink in that exact pattern gets ignored. What it is? The AGM-114 Hellfire. 108 pounds of missile wrapped around a 20-pound warhead past Mach 1 before the smoke clears the tube. 5 miles of reach. Battery Park to Central Park crossed in 11 seconds. Fired from wavetop height at a mark far above it, it climbs first, then noses into a shallow dive of 20 to 30 degrees, flat enough to punch into the side of the stack instead of sailing over the top. And the Belma starts fighting the shot without meaning to. That haze standing off the top of her funnel eats laser light for a living. Diesel soot leaves the marine engine as particles 1/10 of a micron to a full micron across, precisely the size that scatters this wavelength the hardest. 30 feet of thick plume can cut the returning pulse to 1/100th of its strength, and a missile that loses the pulse train coasts blind, which is why the crew crossed a beam and upwind before firing a thing. A 15-knot breeze streams the plume off the far side of the stack, so the beam strikes the clean windward face and the smoke pours away where the seeker never has to look. The wind is on the payroll this afternoon. The second Hellfire screams off the rail 3 seconds behind the first. A seeker can lose the spot in the last second. A first impact throws a bloom that blinds the shot beside it, and a single warhead can shred half a target and leave the other half breathing. Marking the same steel twice pushes the odds of a full stop above 99%. The pair costs about $300,000. The cargo waiting at Kharg is worth about $140 million. Somewhere in a Navy budget office, an American taxpayer just bought the cheapest traffic jam in the Persian Gulf. 8 seconds. A crosswind, a 10-foot steel box, and a moving wall of ship. The lead surviving Peykaap crosses inside a mile, and the crew chief swings the gun onto it without being told. A rocket pod flashes twice off the starboard quarter. Unguided rockets, fired off a 50-foot hull, doing 40 knots in a chop. The best weapon he has is a prayer with a rocket motor on it. Something snaps past the rotor arc, felt through the airframe before anyone sees it, and the pilot holds the aircraft exactly where it sits. Moving now means throwing away 2 missiles and starting this entire afternoon over. 4 seconds. The first Hellfire buries itself in the side of the Belma's funnel, and the casing blooms outward. The second threads the smoke of the first. It tears into the other half of the breach. On the bridge, 12 decks down, the deck shutters once. The engine note cuts out. The Seahawk drops back into the tanker's shadow, and on Kharg, the fresh Zayed sits trapped on its rail with nothing left to shoot at. The world's most expensive paperweight aimed at a hole in the sky. Look inside that torn casing, at the wide steel trunking running down through the ship, because that's the answer. The stack isn't decoration, it's the engine's windpipe. The exhaust uptakes of the main diesel climb straight up through it, and a warhead detonating inside shreds the trunking and every connection packed around it. Fuel lines, control runs, the works. A 2-stroke marine diesel that can't exhaust, can't run. The hull stays whole. Nothing below the weather deck ever catches, and not a soul was within 10 decks of the impact. Propulsion simply ends. That's the whole strike. If you enjoyed this video, watch our breakdown of the B-2 mission that opened this campaign. Bye for now.